Welcome to our reflection on the Gospel of the following Sunday. We're reflecting on the Gospel of the 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. I invite you now to listen to the Gospel. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and asked him a question. "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and so in the same way all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman who also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her." Jesus said to them, "Those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die any more, because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive." Then some of the scribes answered, "Teacher, you have spoken well." But they no longer dared to ask him another question. I think to understand the gospel today, we need to know something about the Sadducees. And the fact that Jesus is talking to the Sadducees means that he has arrived in Jerusalem. Because the Sadducees were an elite group with close contacts with the temple, and they died out quickly once the temple was destroyed. So Jesus is now in Jerusalem. And the question here is about the resurrection, and the Sadducees, who don't believe in it and therefore have a sort of a mock afterlife, dealing with the who's going to marry or who's going to be the husband of this wife. I think we need to understand that this law, the Levirate law that comes from the Old Testament, is basically about how does one live on. In other words, what happens at the end of this life, as it were. And the Levirate law is really based on the idea, well, you live on in the people who are descended from you. And you find that today a lot of people sort of look to their children and they feel good that they are being passed on, as it were. So that the Levirate law is worked around that. And that's what enables them to take this rather silly example and work with it. And Jesus replies, he has 2 replies. The first reply is that, well, it's different, right? That's the way we do things here. But when one goes into this next life, then that's not the way it is. And he says there, these people will never die, therefore they don't need children to carry on their future, as it were. So that's his first point there. But he also makes the point there about those who are worthy to enter this new way of life. And I think that's just a little Lucan bit that Luke puts in, something that wasn't there in the one he's taking it from, the person he's taking it from. So that's the first one. It's really about just the nature of the resurrection. And the second one is one that I don't think we find very convincing, but would have been convincing to the people of his time. The fact that God said he was the father of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And the argument is, well, he doesn't say they're dead, I was their father. No, I am their father. So I think that would have been a more convincing argument in the time of Jesus than it might be for us today. So I feel that the point that's being made here is the affirmation of the resurrection. And this is not a trick question. This is the sort of thing that was discussed there with the Pharisees, who had one opinion and the Sadducees held another. And what I think the Sadducees are doing here, not aiming to trick Jesus, but rather to challenge him on this question, the resurrection, which was a sort of a normal thing that is to be discussed at the time.
You used the word hope in Reflection Sunday or two ago, David.
Yeah.
And I have a sense of hope that comes from this because it's about new life and it's about resurrection.
Yeah.
And I find that kind of encouraging, and I'm reminded of something I read or heard somewhere where someone looked death in the face and saw life. And that again has just stuck with me, and I'm reminded of that in response to the word that we've shared today: new life, resurrection, and that thing that not so much the Abraham and that part of the ending of it, but I'm the God of the living, of the dead and the living and the dead. Yeah, I just find that kind of hopeful.
As you were saying that, seeing life in death, one of the things that I like particularly about St. Teresa of Lisieux is that when she was dying, one of the sisters said to her, and everybody knew she was dying, and she knew she was dying, one of the sisters said, "Death is coming."
Death.
And she said, "No, death is not coming, it's the Lord himself who is coming." And that seemed something positive. And I think that's, this section doesn't go into that, but it's a time to talk about the resurrection. It's a sort of little doorway to start talking about what we believe.
Interestingly enough, there's two aspects to this. I actually love it when Jesus gets challenged. It's a small point, but I really resonate with his intellectual capacity to take on with such commitment and confidence, but not putting these fellows down. And they say, "Teacher, you've taught well, you've spoken well." I like to think that what comes through is this incredible intellect.
Yeah.
But by the same token, we are talking about the resurrection, and I'm sure Davin Day won't mind me saying this, but I was at a very beautiful funeral. I actually find funerals can be quite beautiful occasions to honour someone's life. But in his homily, he said to those gathered, 700 odd people gathered, and he said to them, "The question here is, do you believe in heaven?" As he's standing next to the coffin. Now, you could feel that. You could feel that as a wave go through that congregation. But then at the wake, how many people came up to me and said, "I've been pondering that question, the challenge of the question, do you believe in heaven?" So once again, to me, it's actually, I think it is part of our heritage and tradition to be able to ask challenging questions, just the way he took on the Sadducees here. And, just as the way Davin Day very, bravely really put it out to that congregation, do you believe in heaven? Because that's what we hear about today. And I thought to myself, it hasn't left, I'm still catching up with some people and they keep coming back to it. His words, the challenge, do you believe in heaven? So all of those things came together there. It really wasn't about the 7 wives or the seven husbands.
It was about the resurrection, that's the focal point. Well, you've heard us give a response of what came out of our encounter with Jesus in the Scriptures. We invite you now to look at the Scriptures and ask the question, what is Jesus saying to you in today's Gospel? We invite you now to listen to the reading a second time.
Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him a question. "Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but with no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and so in the same way all 7 died childless. Finally the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her." And Jesus said to them, "Those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die any more, because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living. For to him all of them are alive. Then some of the scribes answered, Jesus, you have spoken well. For they no longer dared to ask him another question.
My practical thing that I wanted to do may seem a bit strange, but it was to reflect on death. And I think that's what we read, what this is about, is the next life, as it were. And what came to mind was that saying of St. Paul, as he struggles to work out whether he should stay or go, and he says, but really to go and to be with Christ, by far the better thing. And I suppose at my age, but at any age really, we can face death very, very quickly. So I thought I might just spend some time reflecting on death as that meeting with the Lord, as St. Therese points out.
Mine's an equally strange thing that I noticed. I know it's about all of those things, but just that beautiful phrase like angels and children of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, do I live out that hereditary? Do I see myself as a child of God and those around me? It's a very beautiful image, that inheritance in baptism, be a child of God.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ponder that. It's a bit selfish, I think, this one.
I was asking myself in response, why do I go to Mass? And I thought, there are many reasons why I go to Mass, but one of them surely is that I'm celebrating the resurrection of the Lord. And it's in that resurrection that my own resurrection is assured. And I'd just like to ponder that mystery and that hope in the coming week.
We invite you now to look at something in the Gospel that you can draw out and make an application to your life. Actually, the challenge that we have as disciples of Jesus is not just to have great experiences, but rather to live like Jesus. Mm-hmm. And therefore, whatever we do really should be directed toward helping us to live like Jesus in a better way. So just spend a moment to see what you can draw from the text and apply to your life. Let us now turn to prayer and ask the Lord for the grace and the courage that we need to do this. Without me you can do nothing, said the Lord, and therefore let us call upon him to give us what we need to implement what we have chosen. Thank you for being with us. I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, and it certainly is for us as well. That this is a time when we come together, and even though we don't see you, there is a rapport there that we are one in the Lord, and that we really are encountering Jesus as we reflect on the Scriptures. We finish now by reading the prayer from the liturgy of the 32nd Sunday.
Almighty and merciful God, graciously keep from us all adversity, so that unhindered in mind and body alike, we may pursue in freedom of heart the things that are yours, through Christ our Lord.